maybe somebody's trying to get a rise out of me, but maybe not.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just my perception.
It was exactly right. And it's, you know, knowing your level of health of why was I triggered by that? You know, and like, oh, well, it was because this and this happened this morning and I wasn't really in a healthy space. You know, I could go from being really healthy to being mid or being unhealthy in just a matter of moments, you know, like something happens and it just like irks you, you know, and like, and then you can kind of, okay, once you accept that, you kind of like take care of like that self-care, kind of talk yourself through it. It's like, okay, that was the reason why. Okay, now I can like be back at, you know, a healthy level.
Welcome to the Echoing Vitality Podcast with Josh and Taylor. I'm Josh, Czech practitioner, and I help you rediscover your vitality.
And I'm Taylor Blakely, your integrative nutritionist with a passion for making wellness simple, sustainable, and fun.
We've been through it all. Back pain, gut issues, the stress of starting over after big moves, and finding our way through life's curveballs.
Now we're here to share real stories, proven tools, and plenty of laughs to help you create a life full of vitality.
So if you're ready to take control of your health and thrive,
let's dive into today's episode. And don't forget, hit subscribe so you can join us every week.
Hi, welcome back to Echoing Vitality. Today we have a very special guest with us. Her name is Andrea Rice. She is the owner of the Healing Hub here in Hayden, just north of us. And she is also the clinical director of the Healing Hub. And I'm just super excited to be having this really great conversation with Andrea today because it's about a subject that I don't know much about, but I did the assessment and kind of figured out my numbers for the Enneagrams. And I think it's just a really wonderful tool that could help people in many different ways. So I'm excited to hear your input on that. So welcome.
I'm so excited. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here with Taylor and Josh. And it's my pleasure to be part of Echo Health.
Yeah. It's very wonderful. Yeah. So thank you for being here and taking the time out of your day to teach us all about what you know and how you implement, you know, Enneagrams in your practice and how it helps people. And I think it'll be awesome to know this information because there's so many tools out there that, you know, people get hung up on maybe different personality tests and things like that, but they don't know how to apply using it, you know. So maybe I would like to know more, and I'm sure our listeners would like to learn more about what Enneagrams can do for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
You want to give just like an overview of like what Enneagrams is? Yeah.
So it's a fancy name. It sounds like something mathematical. It's really not. But the Enneagram is actually the oldest personality theory. It goes all the way back to Iliad and Odyssey, and even like pre-biblical times. And people don't realize that because they think it's a newer trend, you know, because it's kind of resurfaced. But it's actually pretty ancient, which is really kind of cool because it's gone throughout the years, and it's transformed different names and different like manifestations, but like the core being of what the Enneagram is has like carried on. Like, so that's like, to me, that it's tried and true. And it's really one of my favorite personality, and I call it a theory rather than just a personality test because it's so complicated. It's so and complicated in a good way. It's so complex, so it depends on how much you want to know about it. I kind of get like a big-eyed like expression when I talk about it because I'm like a Enneagram like nerd to the nth degree, and so everybody in my office is like, oh, here she goes again, you know. But they've all learned to like love the Enneagram, and we've all that it becomes a language you talk, and it's a huge tool for communication because it takes I use it every day with my clients, with my employees, and I use it with my family, my husband, my kids, any friend group. That's almost like after my second meeting with somebody, I ask them what their type is, or if they don't know the Enneagram, I'm like, okay, we got to figure out what type you are, so that I know how to talk with you, how to communicate with you, and it really just takes the psychopathology out of like disorders or personality disorders, and it brings the humanity back in. And that's what I really love about it is, people, especially with my clients, when they're dealing with certain personality like factors that may not serve them, it's a way of saying, okay, this is my starting point, this is my type, but it doesn't mean that I'm stuck in this unhealthy version of my type. There is a very healthy version of my type that I'm striving for. And so it's just a unique way of identifying yourself, identifying your strong points, your weaknesses, and like what you're working toward. So that's really what I love about it. I don't know how much you want me to go into it.
Yeah, I think as much as we need to.
Okay.
Yeah, I think what you said about, like, after you discover what your type is, it's not like you're stuck there. You're not, warranted to have those negative aspects of that type forever. It's a tool to bring awareness, it seems like, right?
Yeah,
To yourself and how you deal with things, how you handle things, and how to move forward.
Yeah.
Strive for that more healthy side of things.
100%.
Yeah. I can see the connection of like knowing your type, especially when you're working towards like mental stability and like just your mental health. Can you talk about that? Like how that would be a great tool for striving for like more mental stability?
Absolutely. So there's 9 different types in the Enneagram. And out of those 9 types, there are 9 levels of health for each type. And each type also has a wing and also has a type that's related to its stress level and also related to its growth level. So altogether, there's about 32 different personality types. And so dealing with, when a client comes in and they're dealing with relationship problems, or they're dealing with depression or long-term anxiety, or, they've been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder or narcissistic personality disorder, or, something that, when you get a diagnosis like that it's very discouraging, because it seems like, oh, this is just who I am. And it almost feeds into it like a shame cycle of, and almost an excuse, like it leaves someone feeling powerless when they, have terms like that of, this is what's quote unquote wrong with you, or this is where you're falling short in. And with the Enneagram, it's purely the opposite, and it's very empowering, because it says like it's almost like a map of, this is where you are, this is where you want to be, but you have to figure out where you are before you can get to where you want to be. And then you have to figure out what is keeping you from getting to where you want to be and your ultimate goal. And so it's really just an identification of acceptance of, there's nothing wrong with me. This is how I'm created. And depending on my health level and how healthy I am, or how stressed I am, or, if I'm dealing with trauma that's unresolved, it's keeping me kind of in the lower level of health in my type. But it doesn't have to be that way, forever. And so teaching people, whether, it's just open-mindedness, teaching people that acceptance is the first step of change, and it's really just enveloping authenticity and vulnerability of there is no shame in admitting this is where I am at. But I'm embodying that so that I can move to the next level. And it really kind of allows people to take the horns back and take the power back in their life. And that's what I really love about it.
I love that so much.
Yeah.
Because there's so much control that people have in their life, and they just have to be aware of it, or learn that they do have more control than not, and learn that even though there's a diagnosis, that's not the end all be all.
Right.
There's things you can do, mindset shifts, it sounds like, and it takes a little bit of work, I'd imagine.
Yeah, absolutely.
But just being aware and knowing that you have options to kind of move towards a more healthier version of you, which I think is really, really wonderful in so many different areas. Before we get too far, I would love if you could explain briefly what each type is.
Yeah.
That would be absolutely wonderful for our listeners so that they can understand. And
Absolutely.
Yeah, that would be great.
So there's 9 different types, and the way that it's kind of pictured, I wish I had kind of a diagram, but the way it's pictured is kind of a circular. They're all connected. So it's not that 1 is better than a 9 or 9 is higher than a 1 or anything like that. It's just the way that it's categorized. So a 1 is the reformer, and that is the movers and shakers of the world. That is, they walk into a room and they can see everything that's wrong in the room so that they can fix it. And so I will have to say that the majority of my clients are 1s. Because the world is a very hard place for a 1, because all they see is what's wrong. So that because they're innately designed to fix and to right the wrongs. Well, in order to right the wrongs, you have to be aware of the wrong. So where everybody is like living in bliss, the 1s are the ones that see all the wrong, in a project, in a paper. They're the criticizers, and that often comes across negative, but really what it is they have a desire to make the world better. And so, but it's kind of a caveat for them, because they're perfectionists. And so they're the ones that they're very organized. They have categories of everything, and they have boxes of right and wrong and how things should be done. And they're very moralistic. And so they're very like black and white per se. And that's really kind of hard for them, because the world isn't black and white. And so it's hard for them themselves, because they're labeled as criticizers. They're labeled as, nothing's ever good enough for you. And so, it's hard, especially ones that are at like a lower health level. It's hard for the people around them because they constantly feel criticized. But in a 1's mind, they're trying to help them be better. And so it's really kind of unfair, I think. I think they're one of the most misunderstood types. And it's just, the world is a stressful place for 1s. So moving on from 1s, 1s is the reformer. And they are often related to the second number 2, which is the helper. So the helper, they love to help. That is their meaning. Their purpose in life is to love and to care for other people, which is a very positive thing, right? Those are the helpers of the world, the healthcare professionals, the nurses, sometimes the teachers, maybe. They're often the mothers, young fathers. I will have to say, I think that they're, like gender-wise, women are more likely to type as a 2 and to kind of identify with that. But there are often like men who fall in that as well, but it's not as accepted to, be vulnerable in that way for men. So I think that there's a lot of men that mistype as other numbers, that they are actually 2s because they are a helper and they love to present that way. It just may not be as obvious as like when women present as a 2. So the caveat of a 2 is oftentimes if they're in a unhealthy or an average level, they often they want to do good for others, but they expect good to be done to them. So it's like, I'll scratch your back, but you better believe I'm going to expect you to scratch mine when I need it. And so the negative part of that is when they don't get that, then they become very resentful. They become passive aggressive. They feel like they're never going to gain the love that they deserve. They're never going to gain the benefit that they've given to everybody else. And so then they're like, well, I'm going to demand it. So then they become very like difficult in their personalities. A 3 is the achiever. They are the doers. They're the ones that they're the ultimate best. Like they are valedictorians. They are, CEOs. They are the ones that build themselves. They're not afraid to work. In fact, that's like oftentimes they become like workaholics because they're always pushing for a goal. They're the ones that own businesses. They're the ones that become the best of the best. Caveat of that is that they often they're concerned about how people perceive them rather than their own true happiness. So they oftentimes interpret their happiness as if someone sees them as happy or sees them as successful, then they feel successful. But oftentimes there's a gap between that, and they're never truly happy, even if they're at the top of the ladder, because it's not ever really for them. It's for the perception that their success gives them. And so they're often they're sadder than what they put on. And they often, if they're really unhealthy, they kind of bulldoze the other types. And so I'm going to pause and just say I'm married to a 3. And so I very much know this is how an example of how the Enneagram can come across as, be very helpful in communication. So instead of, my saying, hey, to my husband, you are like, you're bulldozing me right now, instead of that being like an attack or something, I can say your 3 is bulldozing my 9 because I'm a 9. And so I'll get to a 9 here in a second. And so it's a way that he can accept that, be like, oh, okay, my 3 needs to like back up a little bit. Yeah. And so it's kind of funny that way, like how we talk in numbers. People would think we're kind of, cray-cray a little bit.
Your 3 is showing.
Oh, gosh. If you have any questions, please feel free to interrupt me. Just kind
this is just fascinating because one thing that, so when I did the test to see where I'm at, and it was going to be one of my questions for you because I scored high and pretty even on 2, 3, and 7. So they're all pretty even. And I'm like, I'm confusing. I'm like, I read all that. Yeah. And what was really cool, and Josh he scored high in 7, but also a 5, I believe. And he kind of reminded me, and he was just like, hey, that sounds like a good leader. like the combination of all the things. And I'm like, you know what? Yeah. Because you can take, the negative parts and be like, do I want to dwell in how much I don't like these negative parts of myself? Or do I want to look at all the good aspects of each one? so that's kind of where I'm at when I had learned about what I have going on. Because I also feel a little confused sometimes. I'm like, why am I like this someday? And then why am I like this someday?
We'll have to delve into that because now I'm curious what you are.
So yeah, anyways, I think that's fascinating.
That's awesome.
You use terms like your speaking is in numbers.
Yeah. Speaking of numbers.
Yeah. So funny.
Well, it kind of brings humor into it a little bit, because, and it is kind of funny because my office is full of twos, which is kind of obvious, like we're a mental health office. And so we're like, I think almost all of my therapists are twos, which is a helper to two-wing 3. And the thing with a two-wing 3 is they feel like their sense of achievement is how much they help other people. Well, in a mental health office, like that's kind of hard because if our clients don't accept our help, like that's out of our control. And so I'm constantly telling like our clinicians who struggle with that, like I'm a failure because they won't let me help them, like, well, that's not up to you, that's up to them, and so not personalizing that, of like a success or a fail depending on how you help other people. So that's kind of the caveat of a two-wing 3.
Yeah. So, I love that because you're combining the two. Like if you, because you can do that.
Like if you scored as a 2 and a 3, like you're probably either 3-wing 2 or 2-wing 3.
Oh, okay. So one's maybe more dominant than the other. Yeah. Okay. So it can present in different ways. So you have like a main number,
and then you have 2 wings on either side. So I'm a 9, and my wings are either an 8 or a 1. And I tend to, I scored as a 9-wing 8, which I'll kind of get to that, but that's kind of a contradiction. Because a 9 is a peacemaker, and an 8 is a challenger. And so it's like, it's interesting how those two like balance, me out as an individual. So,
that is interesting having those two kind of be.
Yeah, most definitely. And every once in a while I lean toward my 1, but I get, just personally, like to be transparent, I get angry if I get put in a position where I have to be a 1, because my peacemaker is like, I want to see the good in the world. So like if you're making me see the bad in the world to change it, it makes me uncomfortable. It takes away my peace. And so then I get resentful. And then my challenger comes out as an 8. It's like challenging whatever it is that's challenging my peace. And so it's like, it's really kind of interesting how they all work together.
Yeah, that is, because they can show up, I'm sure, at different times of your life, right?
Yeah.
One might show up in an area where you need to be more of a challenger or that peacemaker or the reformer to kind of fine-tune things.
Yeah, exactly.
So thank you for sharing that. I think knowing that piece is like, you may have like a more dominant one, but knowing that it's very fluid, it sounds like because humans are very multidimensional, like we have all kinds of things going on. So it's like, you're not just destined to be that one the whole time. It's very, you got options. A part of your personality.
What's so amazing about it is you can pull from your different wings or your different like subtypes whenever you need them. Like they're kind of like resources. And so, like, if somebody needs to be a little bit more assertive, like, I pull from my 8, and like, this is not the time to make peace. This is the time to challenge, or this is the time to bring into my 1 and like change and make something better than what it is. And so,
awesome. So what's number, I think we're on 4? Yeah.
4s are so interesting. They are individualist. So they are very like in tuned. They're the most in tuned with their emotions. And that can go almost too far. So like while the other numbers kind of have mixed emotions about emotions, and sometimes they try to avoid them, the 4 embodies them, and everything that they do is like based on their heart and based on their emotions. So they're the artist, they're the musicians, like they're very usually crafty, artsy, like very in tune with who they are as a person. With that, like the downside of that is that everything is based on emotion. And so like a good thing, too much of a good thing can be a bad thing type of thing. And I don't say like bad thing per se, it's just, it is what it is. So it's one of those, being able to kind of bring in like logic and facts, and not be completely guided only by emotion. So I think the struggle for a 4 would be like their stance is nobody understands me, and I like it that way.
A little mysterious.
They are. They're very mysterious, and they kind of have a like an Eeyore take on life. Of I'm sad, and I kind of like don't try to make me happy because I kind of like being sad, but I'm sad all the time, and nobody understands me. And when they try, they kind of push them away because they don't really want to be understood, but yet it's really lonely not being understood. Yeah. So they kind of fight against themselves in that way. So 4s are very interesting.
What's an imbalance like 4?
What's that?
Like when a 4 is more balanced, or more on like the I guess positive traits. You know, if that makes sense.
They are the ones like they're the feelers of the world. So like we could all benefit from like taking on like some of the 4. When they're healthy, like they are, like I said, they're creative. They're the ones that bring the art. Okay. You know, from
do they
world.
remind you about it's okay to feel?
Yeah.
Like just being around them, or is that type of feeling when you're around them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
You feel like connected. The thing about the 4s, they're extremely empathetic, and they often feel what others feel. So like they're empaths, you know, in a sense. And so that can be, again, that could be a huge positive trait, and that could be like a struggle as well, because you feel everybody else's burdens around you. Yeah. And yet, you know, 4s are not afraid to feel. Like they're not afraid to feel the positive feelings. Like when things are going really well in their lives, they're excited. They have like this zest for life. When things are going like terrible, like they have no mask. And
it's real terrible.
They're super terrible. And I think that's the kind of the struggle, is like sometimes like their highs are really high and their lows are really low. And so, you know, it's with a 4, sometimes they have to like bring in either their wing of a 3 or their wing of a 5 to kind of balance out, you know, that emotion. Yeah. So, yeah, like they're wonderful friends to have, and they just like, they're the ones that understand you. And so, and then yet.
It's so comforting too.
Yeah.
Like when you have that friend who really does understand. Yeah. That's on a very deep level. It's so important. It is. Know? So it must be just a really great quality out there.
It really is.
That people are carrying.
Yeah. And I think the important thing is like so many people just focus on the negative traits, you know, of whatever their type is. And they're like, oh, why do I have to deal with that? Or, you know, why am I that way? But there's the positive that like when you're healthy, you're unstoppable in that sense.
Yeah. So what's a 5 then? You know, because they have to bring in the wing of 5. So
So a 5 is the investigator.
Oh, okay.
So the 5s are so interesting. They are the knowledgeable ones. They often they balance out their 4s because they're fact checkers. Excuse me, and they're the ones that's they're investigative. They want to know the truth about things. They often they often dwell in their mind, and so that can be, again, a positive thing and a negative thing. Where a 4 starts from their heart, a 5 starts from their mind, and
like
from their
more
brain.
logical.
They're very logical, yeah. So they're the ones that often, they have certain topics that they know everything about. They're very they can sometimes get fixated on certain topics, that they enjoy. They hide their emotion behind their knowledge. And so it's not that they don't have emotion. They put their knowledge out there because they're afraid. Like the thing with a 5 is they're afraid that they might not have what it takes for the situation that calls for them. So they put as little into relationships or into a job or into the world because they're afraid if I put too much out there, I'm going to be asked for too much. So they're very minimalistic in their lifestyle and in how they their relationships. They're often the ones that observe rather than participate. So they're the ones that they're introverts. They want to be invited to things, but let me just sit in the corner and let everybody, I'm happy just seeing everybody else play a game because I'm afraid if you ask me to play the game, I may not have the energy to put out. So I'm just going to kind of withdraw. So that's kind of relationships are a little bit tough for them because they're afraid that they may not have what it takes or what is being asked for them.
Yeah, that is so interesting because I live with a 5.
Yes. I can see that.
Yeah. So as you're speaking, I'm like, oh yeah. So, but even all the good things, because he is so knowledgeable in so many things, and I can see very much so how he puts out there, so much knowledge. But in our personal relationship, it had always been like, hey, can we, get a little bit deeper, in more feelings, but the act of, from the 5's perspective or in this case, my husband's perspective is the commitment of being asked of too much, so that's a very interesting concept actually. But he investigates all kinds of things. He'll do all kinds of research. He does get fixated, and it's funny, but I also love the quirks of this, because I think that's a really good term too. It's just it's the quirks of life, and but I also love that about him because he'll get fixated on certain things. And he'll do it all day, like the piano on his phone or something, and he's just making little tunes, and then he's really good at it. Yeah. Or juggling, he just taught himself how to juggle. He got fixated on I'm gonna do this by the end of the day, and then now he can just juggle.
They're super talented.
Yeah. So yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah, and we can kind of get into when certain numbers get stressed, they turn into a different number, which is interesting. Or they take on traits of a different number.
So is that where that diagram comes in with the triangles and kind of pointing you in your
Yep.
Oh, okay. We'll put something out on there so people can see.
Perfect. Yeah, if you can look at it, they have it's the arrow, they call it the arrow theory of when you're integrative and you're growing, you take on the positive traits of a different number, and when you're stressed, you take the negative traits of a different number, and so it's kind of all interconnected.
Yeah, so that's where you can utilize this and just become more aware of what you have going on in your life, because we have the ability to make changes wherever we're at. And there's always a place to start, you know, and I'll ask you that question towards the end after we get through the numbers. But I think it's just so important to know that people can use these tools, and yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
So let's move on to 6. Let's see what that is.
6 is a loyalist, and the majority of our population is a 6.
Oh.
Which is interesting because a 6, so let me start with the positives of the 6. The 6, they are inner community, like, so they need other people. And yet they are suspicious of everyone. And so a 6 is really interesting because there's actually 2 types of 6s. There is the phobic 6, which they almost need someone to tell them what to do, or they need some kind of direction, whether it's with a creed or an idea or a religion or like a company or even just a friend that they attach themselves to, and like they often use that as like a guidance throughout their life, and they're very loyal, hence their name, the loyalist. And sometimes they are almost too loyal. Once they find somebody they're kind of like a barnacle where they, once they find somebody to kind of attach themselves to, they will go down with the ship, you know, and so they have a hard time letting go. And then there's the other side, the flip side of a 6, which is counterphobic. And they see everything, every authority, every entity as a threat to their own safety. So a 6 is very concerned about safety. They see everybody around them as either a possible ally or a possible enemy. But they see, like, I want to make sure my connection with everybody around me is clear and is good because I may need them in some point of my life. Yeah. So it's kind of a, I don't want to say selfish, but like self-preservating. Yeah. Preservating is not a word. I don't know. Preserving. Self-preserving. I make up words all the time. Sorry.
Hey, that's totally fine.
Pretend it's already there. And so they're very self-preserving, but a counterphobic 6, they're kind of anti-people. So they're afraid of trusting anybody. So they either trust too much or they don't trust anybody at all. And sometimes both, like one person can be both counterphobic and phobic, depending on their audience and depending on like the situation. So like they're very interesting.
You know what I thought of with this one, and it could be just, you know, it's television, it's Hollywood, it's movies, but I was thinking like post-apocalyptic movies, you know, where they're very loyal, you know, self-preserving, you know, no outsiders, can't trust. But once you're in, you know, like there's you're in. Yeah. But then I'd imagine there's probably still the I gotta still be on my toes just in case there's any traitors. So that's kind of what kind of popped in my head is.
It's like The Walking Dead.
Yeah, The Walking Dead. Like you're in or you're out, or
100%.
And if you're in, I'm still suspicious.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like finding your gang, but if you turn against that gang or you do something outside of it, then you're on your own. It's true. And we do get a lot of 6s in our practice as well because 6s are, their main emotion is anxiety. So it's very hard for a 6 to relax. It's very hard for them to really be happy because their happiness is dependent on the people around them. And whether the people around them are happy and cause them happiness, then they can be happy. And so they like their struggle in life is to kind of, when they're in a healthy place, they take on the qualities of a 9, where they're at peace with themselves and they're able to relax, and then they're able to utilize like the people around them in a positive way rather than a anxiety provoking way.
Yeah. That is interesting. I had no idea that majority of the population is 6s.
Yeah.
They are 6s. So
It's really interesting. It's like, I think I read somewhere it's like 90% of the population are 6s. I'm like, that's interesting.
I'm just thinking, and observing. I try not to follow too many things on, politics or anything, but like the big movements that happen, it kind of seems like since the majority can kind of fit into that, like, hey, I'm in, you have that one statement, I'm in, and that's a loyalist,
Yeah.
and it's interesting because I'm like, oh, I could never be like, in a riot, or, I can never be like in a really big environment personally, because that would be anxiety for me, but maybe for other people, rallying with other people who have the same agenda, or believe in the same thing, or maybe even like religion too could play a role in that.
100%.
So very interesting. This is why it's so fascinating learning about like the how you can utilize this and just learn how to talk to the people around you and, refine your own personal communication skills and, just make the world a better place in that way.
It really does.
I think that's super cool. So how about we talk about 7?
All right. 7s are the enthusiasts. So they are the life of the party. They walk in and the party begins. They are the ones, their love for life and their zest and their excitement is like literally what makes the world go round. Like they're the people that, like, their laugh is contagious. Their smile is contagious. They walk in the room and all of a sudden it just gets brighter. And everybody loves being around a 7. They're the ones that's like, they're spontaneous. They're the ones that, let's go get ice cream at 3 a.m, type of thing. Let's go on a road trip, they're not huge planners. And so they're like, let's go on a road trip. And then they run out of gas, because they didn't think it through all the way. But they're fun. And they're exciting and everything is an adventure. The caveat, the downside of that is they're often maybe considered kind of flighty or like maybe not as like stable as some of the other numbers, because they're always looking for the next thing. Oftentimes they this is where like a diagnosis kind of like falls into like the Enneagram, like especially like in the work that I do. A lot of people who struggle with ADHD are 7s.
Oh, interesting.
And so instead of putting like a label per se on it, it's like you're just a 7 where, you're distractible and you're looking at all the good things. So you want all the pleasurable things in life. Every decision you make is what is going to bring me the most pleasure. The downside of that is, life isn't all about pleasure. And so they have a hard time with responsibility sometimes. They have a hard time with being grounded and stable. They're always like, squirrel, they have a hard time sitting with their emotions. So they're very avoidant on anything that would not be pleasant or would not be fun or enjoyable. So they have a hard time kind of sitting with sadness or depression. And what's interesting is it causes depression because their expectation of the world doesn't meet the reality of the world. And so then they fall into like deep depression. And they're the ones that's more prone for addiction, because when life doesn't go their way, like they're either like seeking like the next high because they want that fun, or they just want to numb out or avoid anything like unpleasant or hard. So that's the 7.
Yeah, I could definitely relate to some of those things that you're saying, because I did score, pretty even on 2, 3, and 7. And just I like seeing the good in places and people and circumstances, and always trying to just like make things fun. And when they're not fun, it's like really just on the downside, and especially in the winter, just personally, it's just so much harder when I don't have the sun, and I'm like, okay, this isn't ideal. And summer or spring, that's ideal, and then I tend to blossom up so much more, and so I have to be aware of that in myself and make sure that I don't fall more into those tendencies of like depressive, seasonal depression, and and then addiction too, that runs in my family, drugs, alcohol, and I just made a vow when I was 16 that I was not going to do any of those things.
Wow, that's amazing.
And I have not. And so I'm like, I have, had to be very dedicated to that in our lives. And especially like with Josh and I, when we first got together, I was very influenced by friends with drugs and alcohol. And I was like, well, maybe I'll just be influenced and try some weed, and he was looking at me like, you're doing what? And I'm like, you're right. I'm not even going to go hang out with them anymore, or something. So he's been a good reminder, but yeah, being a 7, I love like making things like the most enjoyable. How do we get, the most enjoyable thing out of that? I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
If not.
Are you an introvert or an extrovert? Like, where do you get your energy?
So I always consider myself an extroverted introvert.
Okay.
It's a term that I had learned from Chalene Johnson. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her. She used to do like beach body exercises and whatnot. And she also has a podcast, and I related very, very much so to her. She was talking about ADHD and those sorts of tendencies, and I had related to many of those qualities because I get very distracted, like, ooh, this looks new and fun. Ooh, this looks new and fun.
Shady, yeah.
And then, so like projects, or things like I've really had to like tone down like the squirrels and just be like, dedication to one thing for a little bit, because I'll get discouraged easily if it doesn't come out the way I want it to. So I related very much so to that. But yeah, I love being out and about and meeting people and, just having a smile on my face and having a good time. But then when I come home, I almost turn into a mute, because I'm like, I need like no talking. Yeah, so we'll even go on walks, and sometimes we just don't talk, and I'm like, because I spent so much of my energy like putting out to people who I love and appreciate, and then when I come home, it's my time to just like, get all cozy, take all my work clothes off, and and then rejuvenate. So yeah, extroverted introvert is what I like to call myself.
Makes total sense to me. I think I relate to that. I think I'm that as well. I'm an introvert that has had to make herself be an extrovert because of situations or my job or but I would much rather like you said, be cozy up in a blanket with a good book and a fireplace. That's my like safe place right there.
Heck
But,
yeah. It's cozy. I like it.
Yep.
You know, put on the TV, like YouTube has like the little fake fireplaces and the music.
love it.
That's what we do all the time. And it just creates the right atmosphere for us. So
I love it so much.
yeah. Well, cool. The
8.
enthusiast. Yeah. Let's get to 8.
All right. 8 is the challenger. So
this is also you in
my
a way.
wing. Yeah, this is my wing. So 8s get a bad rap because there's a lot of because even in its names, like they think that rules are made to break.
Hey, I bet Josh is also got a high 8 there too.
Well, it's interesting because 5s turn into 8s.
Oh,
In certain situations, or I shouldn't say turn into 8. Like
embody.
the Enneagram guru would be like they would crucify me for that statement, but they would take on like characteristics of an 8. So when they're healthy, so a 5, like just kind of like if I can use Josh for an example, if a 5 is like in a growth, like they actually go from being like an observer, actually participating, and they actually take control. So their fear of not having enough is set aside, and they're able to kind of assert themselves and be a leader and say what they need to say, advocate for themselves. So they're the ones that actually is like a perfect example of how it's a positive thing. 8s are assertive. They're not afraid to make waves. I shouldn't say they don't care what people think, but a lot less than other numbers. And they're not afraid to break up a relationship. So they're the ones where a 6 goes down with a ship. As soon as the ship starts to tilt, an 8's like, I'm out.
I'm out of here. Yeah. So I don't want anything to do with this.
Exactly. So they're all about control. So their fear is being out of control, and their highest desire is to have control. So the caveat of that is they also want to control other people. So that's like the fault, I guess, or the negative, the struggle for an 8. And they often get seen as also like a bulldozer, like a 3. Dictators are often 8s, or but also like CEOs. They're very much leaders. They have to make the hard decisions, and they're okay with it. And they're, even if it ruins relationships. So, they're very like, they have a balance between like the mental and the facts and the logical side and the emotion when they're healthy, and they're able to that's why they're great like company leaders, because they're able to make hard choices. So they're also in The Walking Dead. They're also Negan.
Yeah, I was thinking Negan.
It's kind of like how I see it, and it's so funny. But then
I love that.
I do. I love like taking shows and then like identifying like what the different parts are of like different characters, and
because I feel like TV and Hollywood, they really exaggerate those qualities.
Yeah.
So you could see yourself in certain characters, and I think that's really eye-opening. So the next time you watch something, you can take all of this knowledge and be like, oh, they're an 8. Yeah, that's an 8 right there. So there's this thing that Josh and I talk about. Josh is, he's like, I don't like villains. Like, he typically does not like any villains in any movies. And it's very rare when the villain is like good in his eyes, like, oh, okay, like I like his character, he had reason, but it's just like a funny thing where you can like relate to, certain characters and whatnot based on just personality traits and maybe the not so great ones too. And you can be like, well, maybe better not, show qualities of dictatorship and things like that. It's a good reminder.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I've noticed like a trend in Hollywood and like cartoons now, even that they kind of like humanize villains now, like kind of like Maleficent, how they show like, oh, this is like a misunderstood villain, or Wicked. Like I just went and saw Wicked.
Oh, I have not seen that one
So
yet.
how she turns from a good witch, she's really a good witch, but then like she got misunderstood and labeled all these things, and then she becomes exactly what she got labeled, and so then she becomes like the bad witch, and so so that's kind of funny because it's like, oh, that's an 8 that turned unhealthy, it's like, now I'm going to demand control because I'm not given freely that control, and so they're the ones that like they're like they have to conquer the world, it's interesting.
I like that humanized villains because you get to see like what's created, and you can think of that in like serial killers even like. Yeah, I'm thinking all kinds of things, especially in movies and
100%.
Yeah.
And what's interesting too is when a 2 becomes really, really unhealthy, they take on the unhealthy portions of an 8. Oh. So like a 2, when they feel like they're not getting the love that they feel they deserve, or the appreciation more so, or value, that they don't feel valued, and that's not going to come back to them like freely, they go into an 8 form and demand it. And so oftentimes, like unhealthy relationships or unhealthy, oftentimes like the borderline personality where it's like this, I want you, I need you, but then I'm going to push you away and I hate you because you're too like I don't know what to expect from you, or might like threaten my safety. Oftentimes that's a 2. And so it's just kind of interesting.
Yeah.
How that correlates.
Like how certain things pop up for people. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
So 9.
9. Let's get to 9.
All right. Well, I definitely know a 9. I am a 9.
You are a 9.
I am a 9. That's my dominant number. 9s are the peacemakers. And so their ultimate goal in life, they just want peace. Like that is their ultimate desire. And their fear is like a threat to their peace, or like a lack of peace. So oftentimes, like when a 9 is average to unhealthy, they're people pleasers because they want everybody to get along. They're like kind of a mediator of like, oftentimes as a kid, like I remember before I even knew I was a 9, I remember being like 2 or 3 and standing in between my 2 sisters that were fighting.
Oh my goodness.
And like, stop fighting, everybody just get along. I think I was like 2 or 3. I could barely talk.
Like, stop it.
Just stop. And that just bothered me so much. Like, stop yelling at each other. And so now I remember that, and I'm like, you're born with that like personality type, and then it's also like nurtured, kind of depending on like how the environment you grew up in, and what they call childhood wounds, and so how your needs are met according to the personality type that you develop, and so that's what's really interesting. So a 9. They're all about peace. The thing with a 9 is that they often like create a bubble. And so the world could be on fire and they're in their like cozy little bubble and they're like peaced out.
Yeah. Yes. I got my zen going on in my life.
Yep.
Have no room.
Yep. Exactly. So, when I'm like covered up with a blanket, my tea or my coffee, my book, like the whole world could be like literally in flames, and I'm just perfectly fine. Well, I mean, to a certain extent. So we fool ourselves, because we we kind of create like a fake peace when we don't have true peace. And so that's kind of how we cope. That's how we survive. But it's also a downside because it's like, you know, there's stressful deadlines at work, or there's, you know, stress happening at home or whatever. The 9 will just binge watch, you know, just like pretend it's not happening.
You're like, everything's fine.
Everything's fine. I'm fine. You're fine. We're all fine. Like that's like made of a 9. Like, and so like it is kind of comical of like, you know, again, like when a 9 is healthy, they take on like the healthy forms of a 3. So when I'm like really productive, when I'm really healthy, I'm super productive. I'm like CEO of a company. I'm, you know, doing all of the things. And then, but that exhausts a 9. So after that, like, you know, if I have a really big push and I get all these things done, I have a week where I'm like 9'd out. And so like, that's kind of how like the term that we use in our house, like my husband's like, don't bug mom, she's 9ing right now.
She's 9ing. She needs her peace.
Yeah, she needs her peace. Just like leave her, like give her some peace. Don't fight, you know, give her a week, like she'll be fine. And so even to this point where like my daughter's like, you know, mom's stressed, she needs to 9, like she needs to go like take a bath.
How old is your daughter?
14.
Oh, okay, so she's very well aware now. She's
is.
like, okay, mom's 9 and out.
Yeah, 9, mom's 9 and out, like she'll be fine, she'll come back, and like, you know, but it's kind of the same thing of like extroverting yourself for so long and then you need to recover.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of the same concept.
I think that's beautiful when everyone, especially in a household setting, can understand these like qualities that each person has and not take it personal, right? Because it's not that you don't want to spend time or, you know, like you just need to recoup, you know, recharge your battery, and then you can come back and give like your all and your love and attention, you know, and that goes for like all of them. Everyone has a way of recharging themselves.
100%.
And just being able to learn and understand and not take it personal when people are like, hey, I have to do this for me, and you know, but the other person might feel like, well, I want to be included, maybe, you know, whatever that looks like. And just know that about the people in your life makes it so much easier, you know, so much more grace can happen if you understand the dynamics that everyone has and what comes up in certain situations, especially stress, especially with work, you know, especially with family dynamics.
Yeah, it really is. It's a game changer. You know, it's a way of just taking, you know, it's non-attacking. It's non-pointing fingers. It's not, you know, not attacking your character or like, you know, in a different world, like that could be considered like lazy, you know, like why is mom just on the couch, you know, or like a 3 could be like, I'm doing all these things, like why are you not, you know, and so like, but like you said, knowing that of like, hey, you know, like 3, why don't you come and 9 with me, you know, and like, and 9, you know, like, okay, like after like the 9 recharges, like then she'll be more apt to be a 3 again, you know, or like jump into that. And so it is, it's very, and it just changes the way that you communicate. And my daughter's a 6. So we have
she's a loyalist. Okay.
My husband's a 3. My daughter's a 6. I'm a 9. So we're kind of a triangle. Like we all kind of turn into each other at certain times. And then my son is an 8.
Oh, and so he's the challenger there.
He is the challenger. Yep. And so he's full blown.
Is he the youngest? Or
he is actually, he's older than my daughter.
Oh,
so
okay.
we just adopted him September 17th.
Aww.
So he's our new addition.
Yeah.
He's 15. And
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's very exciting. He's been living with us for about a year now. So we've kind of gotten to know his personality. And when he first took it, he was a 5. And it was interesting because he was in a kind of a different time in his life. And like he was kind of afraid to completely like participate in life because he had gone through a lot of trauma, and he was still like, he was displaced, and he was going from one place to another. And so he had learned that it's better to just withdraw and you know, like fixate on certain like topics that were safe rather than kind of involve himself in it. But then as like he got settled, like it was really interesting because then we saw more of an 8 where he felt safe enough to challenge. And so seeing that as a positive thing, you know, they ask questions where my husband as a 3, sometimes, you know, like he had to get used to that and is still kind of getting used to that because he's like, he felt like questioning was like, or challenging was kind of maybe like a threat or like disrespect, you know, perhaps. Whereas from an 8, that's just who they are. Is they just challenge everything. You could say the sky is blue, and they're like, no, it's periwinkle.
You know? You're like, okay.
And so like knowing like that's just who he is, of how he's like discovering himself.
Yeah. And it's just so all of these is just how each person views the world.
Yeah.
And through their lens, they're not trying to ruffle anyone's feathers, you know, because some of them, it seems like you can like rub each other the wrong way, just being who you are unintentionally, right? But I feel like most people don't have the intention to ruffle any feathers like that. Would you say that's true?
Yeah. I don't think people like wake up and say, you know, I just want to be a pain in someone's butt today, you know, like, I mean, maybe the 8, that kind of gives them some joy. They like that argument.
What can I get out, especially in a sibling dynamic, maybe.
Yes, an 8 and a 6,
8 and a 6 here. Loyalists, okay.
And a challenger. So they're constantly like challenging each other, I guess.
Yeah, because I'm sure like each one of these can be, you know, like when they're healthy, like in their power, you know, like in their confidence and their self-worth, you know, they could be very strong, you know,
good.
and that could, if someone else is not and they're healthy, that could definitely feel like a threat.
Yeah.
But when you're maybe in that unhealthy state, especially when you start bringing awareness, because I feel like awareness is so important to knowing why you react the way you do, and you know how you handle stress in all the different areas of your life and people, you know, just how you communicate, and 100%. Know that, you know, maybe somebody's trying to get a rise out of me, but maybe not. Yeah. Maybe that's just my perception.
It was exactly right. And it's, you know, knowing your level of health of why was I triggered by that? You know, and like, oh, well, it was because this and this happened this morning and I wasn't really in a healthy space. You know, I could go from being really healthy to being mid or being unhealthy in just a matter of moments, you know, like something happens and it just like irks you, you know, and like, and then you can kind of, okay, once you accept that, you kind of like take care of like that self-care, kind of talk yourself through it. It's like, okay, that was the reason why. Okay, now I can like be back at, you know, a healthy level. So, or you can just embody kind of like accept I'm unhealthy right now. And this is what I need to do to kind of preserve myself until I can build that resilience back up again.
Yeah. I think that's really great to know. And for people who are maybe just learning this for the first time, like, why would they want to do this? And then maybe a resource that you know of to get them started, whether that be a
Absolutely.
book or a website or something. I would love to hear that from you.
Yeah, 100%. Well, like a lot of people don't actually know, but I'm an Enneagram coach. And that's, I embody this in my practice as a therapist. But there are so many websites, and I mean, there are so many resources. There are playlists according to your type. There
Like
are
on Spotify or something?
on Spotify.
Really?
There are workouts that you can Google, like just like workouts for an Enneagram Type 9 or Enneagram Type 5, whatever it is. And there's meditation exercises that you can look up on YouTube of, meditation or mindfulness for a certain type. There are 2 websites I just want to mention really quickly. Let me spell one out because it's interesting. It's called eclecticenergies.com. So it's eclecticenergies.com. And that has the Enneagram test. Really kind of, there's multiple tests. That's the one that I like the best. It's detailed enough. It gives you your wing. And it takes about 20 to 30 minutes to complete. But it's all free.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And there's also, there's a summary with each one that you can read of like the different types. The other website is the EnneagramInstitute.com.
Ooh.
And that's like basically just how it's spelled. And that has a whole section of relationships. So like how a 2 and a 5, how they complement each other and how they may have hot spots, or a 7 and 5 or 7 and 9, 3 and 9, that kind of thing. So that's really helpful.
Oh, that's awesome. I really think it's cool that you can blend this in with your life and your relationships, and you can incorporate it into your home life and even work. You said you had your team do it all, right? And then your family. So it's just a really helpful tool just to learn how to cope and understand and dive deeper into yourself, because it seems like this gets really deep especially when you can coach just on Enneagram, right? And I think it's just fascinating.
It is.
How long have you been doing this?
Oh, let's see. I got into the Enneagram around 2020.
Oh, okay.
And it was my job, like I worked for a residential facility for young adults and teenagers, and they had everybody do all the tests. They had all the employees, all the therapists, and all the clients do it. And so it really piqued my interest, and it was just a whole new world basically of how to look at people, how to understand people, and to understand, hey, they're not intentionally being a jerk, or intentionally being passive aggressive. They're doing that because of a reason, or because this is, they're triggered in their type, or they may not be healthy, the healthiest at this point. So it just gives some understanding and not to take things so personal. Like even with our team of, it's okay. So-and-so, is just like their 2 is kind of like delving into their 8 right now. Just give them some grace and they'll be all right. They'll go back into their 2 and their helper form, and so just it really, I don't know, changes the way you view people and view yourself, really.
Yeah. I think that's beautiful. Because there's, like I mentioned earlier, so much more grace can be given, right?
It does,
And it's not personal at all. Most people, I feel like, are just living life.
Yeah.
And, just sometimes coming off in a way that could potentially just rub someone the wrong way. And That's not the case.
Yeah.
It's not the case. But so, Andrea, I have a question for you. We have our podcast named Echoing Vitality, and I would love to just ask you if you had one piece of advice for our listeners to start echoing vitality in their life, what would that be?
In relation to the Enneagram or just in general?
Whatever comes to your heart right now.
Well, I will have to say one thing that I've kind of adopted as a motto for myself and for our team and our clinic is like we just say the term like hug the cactus. And like what that really means is there are so many different things that kind of it is uncomfortable, whether it's change or whether it's new job, new school, maybe it's a hard conversation that you're putting off, or maybe it's a task you're procrastinating, or maybe it's just taking that first step into a new adventure or that leap that is causing anxiety, regardless of like what your type is. And like hugging the cactus means like embracing that discomfort, like turning toward that thing that seems so daunting or so impossible, or so it like the anticipation is actually worse than the actual like task or the actual conversation that needs to be had. So whether it's setting boundaries with somebody, whether it's meeting somebody new, or whatever that is that you like have everything within you tries to push away and tries to like avoid, like we're not going to do that today, I don't have what it takes. Instead, it's actually turning toward that thing, embracing that thing, and enveloping it. And it causes the power differential. It causes you to have more power over the monster or over the cactus. And, it's actually bringing that cactus toward you rather than pushing it away because we're afraid of the needles. We're afraid that it might hurt. We're afraid that it might sting a little bit. It's actually like embracing that and then like making that like kind of a comfort, or bringing that toward ourselves. And it actually makes the power differential of that thing go down and our ability to go up, which causes self-esteem to go up and self-image and the achievement. Like, I did this hard thing. I can do another hard thing, and so it's really embodying and it's really empowering. And so like I just, in this new year, like think about that one thing, think about the cactus in your life, like whether it's this week or even today, of like, and instead of pushing that cactus away and staying, like keeping it in the desert, bring it into you, like bring it into your life, hug it, embrace it, draw toward it, and be in charge of it. And take back your control of it. So,
that's beautiful. Embrace the discomfort. Embrace that cactus. I like that. Well, thank you so much, Andrea.
Yeah.
This whole conversation today was absolutely wonderful.
I enjoyed it.
You brought it into such a context that was very relatable, and I really appreciate that. So,
thank you for having me.
Yeah,
it was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
How can people
Oh, yeah. Oh. Yeah, okay. No, you're right. He's so good at that. So, Andrea, how can people find you, get to know you, work with you?
Yeah. So our clinic is called, just like Taylor had mentioned at the beginning, is called Healing Hub. And we are on Hayden Road. Let me see if I can remember our exact address because like I'm terrible at remembering numbers. But it's 8677 North Wayne Drive, Hayden, Idaho, 83814. And We are, let's see, if you're familiar with Hayden, we are right behind the Human Bean a coffee shop. So Google and Apple hasn't quite found us yet. So they keep sending people like other directions. So if you just remember, we're right behind the Human Bean. We share a building with LTA Architect. And we have, let's see, we have a staff. We have 6 therapists now, and which is very exciting. We've been expanding. And our website is healinghub.life, L-I-F as in Frank E. And our number is 208-762-3475. And we would love to meet with you, would love to consult with you, whether it's Enneagram coaching you're looking for, whether it's just a consultation, whether it's therapy in itself. We would love to have you and be a part of your life.
Yeah. What other modalities do you have in the Healing Hub?
What other services? So we also provide chiropractic services through Beyond Bones. They're a part of our hub. We also provide financial counseling. We provide spiritual counseling. Let's see, we provide anxiety treatment called Alpha STEM, which is a like non-invasive, non-medicated anxiety treatment. We provide Enneagram coaching. So yeah, we're like, hence like the name, the hub is kind of where we want to embody like mind, body, soul, and spirit, whether it's individual or family work, couple work, like post-divorce work, co-parenting. We kind of work through like the whole spectrum of beginning a relationship, through changes in a relationship, and maybe like a disintegration of a relationship, and doing that in an amicable way. And like that's really kind of our full range of spectrum. We work with kids, we work with adults, we work with Medicare, we work with like the elderly like population. Again, like I said, we work with couples, relationships, families, children, teenagers, parents. We do parent coaching. We work with post-divorce and court cases, reunifying families together that have been like destroyed or destructed from divorce or conflict. So yeah, that's just a little bit about who we are.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
So if you are in the local area to Coeur d'Alene or Hayden, Rathdrum, Post Falls area, Worley, Plummer, you're only about 45 minutes from where we are located here in Worley, so not too far. But yeah, reach out to Andrea, reach out to her team.
We also provide telehealth, so...
Oh, yeah, that's wonderful.
Anywhere in Idaho, we're able to provide virtual services as well.
Oh, wonderful. Well, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Andrea, and thank you for coming down here and chatting with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course.
I appreciate you.
And I hope you all enjoyed this episode with Andrea Rice, the owner of Healing Hub, and I hope you just took so much out of it and then learn more. We'll put that all in the description of this podcast, and you'll get to hear more about it.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Nice.
Cool.
That it?
Yeah. Take one, take two.